The security camera showed nothing. 7 minutes of black screen. But I was there. I saw the craft. I saw him crawling from the wreckage. And when he looked at me with those eyes, I knew my life would never be the same. What he revealed about prayer will destroy everything you think you know about God. What you're about to hear will make you question everything you thought you knew about prayer and faith. If you're ready, subscribe. Because these stories are not ordinary. My name is Thomas Reed. I'm 52 years old, and for the last 7 years, I've worked the night shift as a security guard at Henderson Industrial Complex in rural Ohio. It's not glamorous work. It's not the kind of thing you tell people about at parties. Though, to be honest, I don't go to parties anymore. Most nights nothing happens. I walk the perimeter of the complex, checking doors and gates that are always locked. I monitor security cameras that show nothing but empty parking lots and the occasional stray cat. I drink coffee from a thermos that's older than some of my coworkers and try to stay awake until dawn breaks over the flat Ohio landscape. Then I go home to my small apartment, pull the heavy curtains closed against the morning light, and sleep through the day while the rest of the world goes about their business. It's a solitary existence, and I'd be lying if I said I chose it. It chose me, in the way that life chooses things for you when you stop making active decisions about your own future. But I'll get to that. I used to be different. When I was younger, maybe 20 or 21, I actually believed I could find answers to the big questions, the real questions. Why are we here? What happens when we die? Is there a God? And if so, what does he want from us? I was hungry for truth in a way that seems almost naive to me now. I enrolled in college to study philosophy, convinced that somewhere in the writings of great thinkers I'd find what I was looking for. I devoured everything. Sartre and Camus taught me about the absurdity of existence. Nietzsche told me God was dead and we'd killed him. The Buddhists spoke of suffering and detachment. The Stoics preached acceptance. Christian theologians debated the nature of divine grace and human free will. And for 2 years I read and studied and wrote papers and participated in discussions with other students who were just as lost as I was. But here's what I discovered. Every system had holes. Every religion had contradictions it couldn't explain away. Every philosopher, no matter how brilliant, eventually came to a point where they had to admit they were guessing, hoping, believing without proof. And the more I studied, the more I realized that nobody really knew anything for certain. We were all just making our best guesses and calling them truth. So I dropped out. Not dramatically. Not with any grand declaration. I just stopped going to classes one semester and never went back. I told myself I'd return. Eventually, but I never did. Instead, I drifted. I took whatever jobs I could find. Factory work, retail, overnight stocking at a grocery store. Nothing that required much thought. Nothing that demanded I figure out who I was or what I believed. In my 30s, I met a woman named Jennifer. She was kind, practical, not particularly interested in philosophy or big questions, which at the time felt like a relief. We got married in a small ceremony with just a few friends. No family. Mine were gone by then, and hers didn't approve of me. We bought a small house. We talked about having kids someday. We went through the motions of building a life together. But it was all surface. We were companions, not partners. Roommates who shared a bed occasionally, but not much else. We didn't fight, which I thought was a good thing at the time. Now I understand we didn't fight because neither of us cared enough to argue. After 8 years, we sat down at the kitchen table one evening and admitted, without anger or tears, that we'd both be happier living separate lives. The divorce was painless. We sold the house, split everything down the middle, shook hands and went our separate ways. I moved into a cheap apartment. She moved to another state. We haven't spoken since. And that's how I've lived for the last 15 years. Alone. Working nights because day shifts require too much interaction with other people. Reading books I've read before because new ones require too much mental energy to process. Watching the same movies because they're comfortable. Eating the same meals because making decisions about food feels exhausting. Waiting for something I couldn't name and didn't really believe would ever come. I'd become, without quite realizing it, a ghost. Present, but not really alive. Existing, but not living. And the worst part was, I'd accepted it. This is just how life is, I told myself. Some people get meaning and purpose, others get by. I was one of the ones who got by. Until the night I wasn't. I stopped praying a long time ago. Not in any dramatic way, like some crisis of faith where I shook my fist at the sky and demanded answers. It was quieter than that, more gradual. like a relationship that dies not from betrayal, but from slow, creeping indifference. When I was a kid, maybe 8 or 9, my parents took me to church most Sundays. We were Protestant, nothing too intense, no speaking in tongues or handling snakes, just standard hymns and sermons about loving your neighbor, and the occasional potluck dinner in the fellowship hall. I remember being told that God loved me, that Jesus had died for my sins, which seemed like a strange concept when I was too young to have committed any sins worth dying for. And I remember being taught that if I prayed, really prayed, God would hear me. So I did. I prayed for small things at first, the way kids do. Help me pass this spelling test. Make Tommy Peterson stop picking on me at recess. Let it snow so we don't have school tomorrow. And sometimes those prayers seemed to work. I'd pass the test. Tommy would leave me alone, at least for a while. Snow would fall, and I'd think, see, it works. God is listening. But as I got older, the prayers got bigger, and the results got hazier. I prayed for my parents to stop fighting, but they kept fighting. I prayed for my grandfather to survive his heart attack, but he died anyway. I prayed for clarity about what I was supposed to do with my life, but the clarity never came. And every time a prayer went unanswered, I'd hear the same explanations. It's God's will. He works in mysterious ways. Maybe what you're asking for isn't what you really need. Sometimes the answer is no. And for a while I accepted those explanations. I told myself that God knew better than I did, that there was some larger plan I couldn't see, that faith meant trusting even when things didn't make sense. But then came the prayers that really mattered, the ones I prayed late at night when I couldn't sleep, the ones that came from a place so deep I didn't even have words for it. Show me why I'm here. Give me a reason to believe this life has meaning. Help me understand what I'm supposed to do. Just give me a sign. Anything, please. And nothing came. No voice, no vision, no sudden clarity, just silence. The same silence I'd been living in my whole life. By my mid-40s, I'd stopped praying altogether. Not because I'd decided God didn't exist. I honestly didn't know if he did or didn't. I'd stopped because it felt pointless, like shouting into a void and pretending the echo was an answer. If God was out there, he clearly had better things to do than worry about Thomas Reed. And if he wasn't, then I was just talking to myself anyway. Either way, what was the point? So that's who I was on the night of October 17th. A 52-year-old man who'd given up on most things, including prayer, working a job that required nothing from me except showing up and staying awake. No ambitions, no expectations. Just another night in an endless string of identical nights. Except it wasn't. It was 2:47 in the morning when everything changed. I remember because I just checked my watch for probably the 10th time that hour, counting down until 6 a.m. when my shift would end and I could go home. The complex was quiet, which was normal. Henderson Industrial didn't run 24-hour operations. The day shift packed up and left by 5 p.m., and then it was just me and the hum of old fluorescent lights and the occasional creaking of the building settling in the October cold. I was sitting in the security office, a cramped room that smelled like burnt coffee and old paperwork, doing my routine camera check. 12 monitors arranged in a grid, each showing a different angle of the complex, parking lots, loading docks, the main entrance, the perimeter fence, all empty, all exactly as they should be, until they weren't. Camera 12 flickered, just for a second, a brief disruption in the grainy black and white feed. I leaned forward, squinting at the screen. Camera 12 covered the back loading area, the part of the complex that backed up to a dense stretch of woods. Nobody ever went back there at night. There was nothing to see. The flicker happened again, and then the screen went to static, pure white noise like an old television searching for a signal that wasn't there. I frowned and reached for the control panel, ready to reset the camera. But before I could, camera 11 went to static, then camera 10. My hand froze halfway to the controls. 3 cameras, in sequence, all covering the back section of the property, all dead. In 7 years of working this job, I'd seen cameras malfunction. It happened. The equipment was old, the wiring was older, but never like this. Never 3 at once, never in perfect sequence. I sat back in my chair, my heart beginning to beat a little faster. Something about this felt wrong. Not dangerous necessarily, just wrong. Like the universe had hiccuped and I'd noticed. I switched to the backup feed, hoping it was just a glitch in the main system. But the backup screen showed the same thing. Black. Nothing. like those 3 sections of the property had simply ceased to exist. I checked my watch. 2:49. I made a note in the log. Cameras 10 through 12, malfunction. Time, 02:49. We'll check in person after monitoring for further issues. And then I waited, because that's what you do in security. You don't run off to investigate every little technical problem. You monitor, you document, you stay calm. The minutes crawled by. 2:50, 2:51, 2:52. I kept my eyes on the other 9 monitors, looking for anything unusual, but everything else was normal. Empty parking lots, locked gates, silent buildings. At 2:54, just as suddenly as they'd failed, all 3 cameras came back online. The static vanished, replaced by the normal grainy footage of empty pavement and chain link fence. I immediately rewound the footage, checking the timestamp. 7 minutes. The cameras had been down for exactly 7 minutes. But that wasn't what made my blood run cold. It was what appeared in the frame after they came back online. In the far corner of camera 12's field of view, right at the edge where the pavement met the tree line, there was something that hadn't been there before. Something dark, something large, something that absolutely, definitely had not been there 7 minutes ago when the cameras went down. I leaned so close to the monitor my nose almost touched the glass. The image was grainy and the lighting was terrible, just a single sodium vapor lamp casting sickly yellow light across that section of the lot. But I could make out the basic shape, irregular, maybe 10 feet long, maybe 6 feet high. Dark metal, or something that looked like metal, reflecting the lamplight in strange fluid ways. My first thought was that someone had dumped something. Fly tipping. It happened occasionally. People would drive out to industrial areas in the middle of the night and dump old furniture or construction debris to avoid paying disposal fees. But this was different. The shape was too uniform, too deliberate. And how would someone have dumped something that size in 7 minutes without any of the other cameras catching them? I picked up my radio and flashlight and headed for the door. I had no idea that when I stepped outside into that cold October night, I was about to discover something that would change not just my life, but everything I thought I knew about reality itself. Whatever it was, I needed to see it in person. Document it. Call it in if necessary. That was my job. That's what I got paid for. The October night air hit me like a slap as I stepped outside. Cold. Sharp. The kind of cold that makes your lungs ache when you breathe. My breath came out in visible clouds as I crossed the empty parking lot, my footsteps echoing off the metal buildings. The complex felt different at night, bigger somehow, more oppressive, like the shadows were deeper and the silence was louder. I walked past rows of parked forklifts and stacked shipping containers, following the path toward the back loading area. The sodium vapor lamps cast pools of sickly yellow light every 50 feet, leaving long stretches of darkness in between. My flashlight beam cut through the shadows, swinging back and forth as I walked. As I got closer to the tree line, I slowed down, because now I could see it clearly, and it was nothing like what I'd expected. The thing was massive, easily the size of a delivery van, but the shape was completely wrong for any vehicle I'd ever seen. It was smooth in some places, with curves that looked almost organic, like they'd been grown rather than built. But in other places it was angular, geometric, with sharp edges that caught the lamplight and threw it back in ways that hurt my eyes. The surface wasn't one consistent color. It shifted, blues and purples and silvers that seemed to flow across the metal like oil on water, and the metal itself, if it even was metal, looked almost liquid. Not like it was melting, more like it was constantly moving at a microscopic level, rearranging itself. I stopped about 20 feet away, my flashlight beam playing across the surface of the object. My mind was racing, trying to fit what I was seeing into some category that made sense. Experimental aircraft, military prototype, some kind of art installation that someone had illegally dumped, but none of those explanations felt right, because this thing radiated wrongness. It didn't belong here. It didn't belong anywhere on Earth. And then I saw him. At first I thought it was just a shadow, a trick of the light, but shadows don't move the way this shadow was moving. It was at the base of the craft, partially hidden behind what might have been a support strut or landing gear, and it was dragging itself across the pavement. My breath caught in my throat. The movement was wrong, the proportions were wrong. The arms, if they were arms, were too long, the head was too large. The way it moved was jerky, pained like every inch of progress cost something. I should have run. Every instinct I had screamed at me to turn around, get back to the security office, lock the door, and call someone. Anyone. The police. The military. I didn't care who. Just someone whose job it was to deal with whatever this was. But I didn't run. Instead, I raised my flashlight with a hand that shook so badly the beam wobbled across the pavement, and I clicked it on, directing the full brightness straight at the figure. The light caught him full in the face, and my knees nearly gave out. He wasn't human, not even close. The skin, if you could call it skin, was smooth and pale gray, almost translucent. There were veins visible beneath the surface, but they didn't look like human veins. They pulsed with a faint bioluminescence, blue-green lines mapping pathways across his face and neck. The eyes dominated his features, huge, dark, almond-shaped. They took up nearly half his face, and they were entirely black. No whites, no visible pupils, just deep, endless black that seemed to swallow light. There was no nose, just two small slits that flexed slightly with each breath. The mouth was barely visible, a thin line that didn't move. We stared at each other across 20 feet of cold pavement. Him collapsed on the ground, me frozen in place, my flashlight shaking so badly I was surprised I didn't drop it. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I could hear it in my ears. My mouth had gone completely dry. This isn't real, I thought. This isn't happening. I'm hallucinating. I fell asleep in the security office, and this is a dream. Or I'm having a stroke. Or I've finally lost my mind. 52 years, and I've finally completely lost my mind. And then I heard it. Not with my ears. Inside my head. A voice that was somehow both foreign and intimate. It bypassed my ears entirely and spoke directly into my consciousness. Please, help me. I stumbled backward, a strangled sound escaping my throat. The rational part of my brain, what was left of it, tried to reject what was happening, tried to find any explanation that made sense, but there was nothing, no explanation, no rational answer. Just this impossible being looking at me with those bottomless eyes, and a voice inside my head that shouldn't be there. The voice came again. Weaker this time, more desperate. Please, I am hurt. My craft is damaged. I cannot repair it alone. My mouth worked soundlessly for several seconds before I managed to force words out. What are you? The being shifted slightly, and a wave of pain seemed to radiate from him. I didn't see it. I felt it, like an echo inside my own body, a sympathetic response to suffering I shouldn't be able to perceive. My name is Aerith. I come from very far, away. There was an accident. My navigation system failed during atmospheric entry. I tried to land safely, but the damage was too severe. I crashed here. I shook my head trying to clear it, trying to think. But my thoughts felt like they were moving through thick mud. This can't be... I know this is difficult for you, Thomas. The voice was gentle now, patient. I apologize for the shock, but I need your help. Without repair, my craft cannot leave. And if I am discovered by your authorities, I will not be treated well. How do you know my name? The question came out sharper than I intended. I can perceive surface thoughts, names, basic identity. It is not invasive. I do not go deeper without permission. It would be a violation. A being from another world, telepathic, crashed in the back of Henderson Industrial, and asking me, Thomas Reed, 52-year-old night shift security guard, for help. The absurdity of it should have made me laugh, or cry, or something. But all I felt was a strange, unexpected calm settling over the initial shock. Because here's the thing. I'd spent 30 years looking for proof that there was something more to existence than what we could see and touch and measure. I'd read philosophy. I'd studied religion. I'd searched for meaning in every book and every system I could find. And I'd come up empty, convinced that maybe there were no answers. Maybe we really were just biological machines running out the clock until we stopped. And now, standing in a loading dock in rural Ohio at 3 a.m, staring at an alien being next to his crashed spacecraft, I had my answer. There was more. So much more. More than I'd ever imagined. But that realization would have to wait. Because right now there was an injured being who needed help. And despite everything, despite the impossibility and the fear and the complete insanity of the situation, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Compassion. What I didn't know yet was that helping him would cost me everything I thought I knew about God, prayer, and the true nature of reality itself. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, I had to keep him alive. "I need to get you out of sight," I heard myself say, my voice steadier than it had any right to be. "If anyone sees this in a few hours when the day shift arrives, there will be questions nobody can answer." Aerith tried to move, and another wave of pain pulsed through the space between us. It was so intense I actually gasped, my own leg aching in sympathy with an injury that wasn't mine. My leg is broken, and I believe there is internal damage. I can move, but not far, not quickly. I looked around. The loading area would be crawling with workers in less than 4 hours. Delivery trucks would arrive. Managers would be inspecting shipments. There was no way to hide a 10-foot alien spacecraft in broad daylight. "Can you walk if I help you?" I asked. "Perhaps. But the craft cannot be moved. It is too damaged. And, even if it weren't, it is too heavy for your physical strength. Then we hide you first and figure out the rest later." I didn't let myself think about what I was doing. Didn't let myself consider the consequences. If I stopped to think rationally about the situation, about what would happen if anyone found out I'd helped an extraterrestrial hide from authorities, I'd probably collapse right there next to him. So I just acted. I approached carefully and helped Aerith to his feet, or what passed for feet. His body was surprisingly light, much lighter than a human of similar height would be. His bones must have been hollow or made of something less dense than human bone. I practically carried him across the lot, moving as quickly as I dared, constantly glancing over my shoulder to make sure no one else was around. There was an old storage building about 100 yards from the loading area. It hadn't been used in months, maybe longer. The company had been talking about tearing it down, but they kept putting it off. It was full of broken equipment, forgotten supplies, and years of accumulated junk. Nobody ever went in there. Perfect. I shouldered open the rusted door, wincing at the loud creak it made. Inside, the building smelled like motor oil and decay. Dust motes danced in the beam of my flashlight. Old machinery cast strange shadows across the concrete floor. I helped Aerith to the back wall behind a stack of wooden pallets and some plastic sheeting. "Stay here," I said. "Don't move, don't make any noise. I'll come back when I can. Do you understand?" "I understand." There was a pause, and then something that felt like gratitude flowing through our mental connection. "Thank you, Thomas Reed. You're taking a great risk." "Yeah, well," I said, not quite knowing how to respond to telepathic gratitude from an alien. "We'll figure it out." I left him there and walked back to the security office on legs that barely held me up. My mind was spinning. My heart was still racing. I kept expecting to wake up, to realize this had all been some bizarre dream brought on by too much coffee and too many overnight shifts. But I didn't wake up, because this was real. As impossible as it seemed, this was actually happening. I sat at my desk, staring at the security monitors without really seeing them. The craft was still there on camera 12, clearly visible now in the sodium lamplight. There was no hiding it. Not from the cameras, not from the day shift supervisor who'd be here in a few hours. I needed a plan, but my brain felt like it had been short-circuited. Every time I tried to think logically, I'd remember those huge dark eyes staring at me. That voice inside my head. The way his pain had echoed in my own body. My shift ended at 6. I logged the camera malfunction in the daily report. "Equipment failure," I wrote. "Technical glitch." Cameras 10 through 12 went offline for approximately 7 minutes. Recommend maintenance check. Nothing out of the ordinary. The lie came easily. Too easily. But what else was I supposed to write? Possible alien spacecraft crash in backloading area, please investigate. I clocked out, got in my car, and drove home in a daze. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the Ohio sky in shades of pink and gold. It was beautiful, peaceful, completely at odds with what had just happened. I pulled into my apartment parking lot, climbed the stairs to my unit, and went inside. I pulled the curtains closed, made coffee, sat at my small kitchen table and tried to process what I'd just experienced. An alien, a real extraterrestrial being, named Aerith, crashed in the back of the industrial complex where I worked, injured, scared, asking me for help. And I'd said yes. I'd hidden him. I'd lied to cover it up. I'd committed myself to something I didn't understand and couldn't begin to predict the consequences of. Why? Why had I done it? I thought about that as I sat there drinking coffee that tasted like ashes in my mouth. And I realized the answer was simpler than I'd expected. Because for the first time in 15 years, maybe longer, I'd felt like my actions mattered. Like I was part of something bigger than my small, pointless existence. Like the universe had reached out and touched me directly, personally, and asked me to make a choice. And I'd chosen to help. I didn't sleep that day, not even for a few minutes. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every moment of the encounter. The way Aerith had looked at me, the pain in his mental voice when he'd asked for help, the weight of his body when I'd carried him to safety. And I thought about what came next. Because Aerith was still there, hidden in that storage building, injured and vulnerable, and his craft was still sitting in plain sight in the back loading area. Someone would notice it, someone would investigate, and when they did, they'd start asking questions. Questions I couldn't answer without exposing Aerith. I needed to go back tonight. I needed to talk to him, figure out what to do about the craft, figure out how to help him without destroying my own life in the process. But more than that, I needed to know. I needed to understand. Because if Aerith was real, if beings from other worlds actually existed, then what else was real? What else had I been wrong about? What else was out there waiting to be discovered? At 4 in the afternoon, I gave up trying to rest. I made coffee. I paced my small apartment. I tried to eat something but couldn't keep it down. My stomach was in knots. My hands were shaking. And underneath the fear and the confusion, there was something else. Something I hadn't felt in so long I almost didn't recognize it. Excitement, anticipation. The feeling that something was about to change, that the door to a bigger world had just opened a crack, and I was standing on the threshold, trying to decide whether to step through. When I returned to work that night, everything looked the same. The same cameras, the same empty parking lot, the same fluorescent lights humming in the security office, but nothing would ever be the same again. Because hidden in that storage building was a being from another world, and he was about to show me something that would shatter 30 years of unanswered prayers. When I left for work that night, I stopped at a convenience store and bought supplies, bottles of water, protein bars, energy drinks, a first aid kit, though I had no idea if human medical supplies would help an alien, bandages, pain relievers, antiseptic. It felt better than showing up empty-handed, even if I was completely out of my depth. The complex was quiet when I arrived, same as always. I checked in with Miller, the day shift supervisor, keeping my expression carefully neutral. "Anything happened today?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Miller barely looked up from his phone. "Nope. Dead as usual." "Oh, maintenance checked out those cameras you reported. Said they couldn't find anything wrong. Probably just a temporary glitch." "Anyone go near the back loading area?" "Why would they? Nothing back there but containers and rats." I nodded, relief flooding through me. "Right. Okay. Have a good evening." Miller waved me off without looking up, and I headed to the security office. I waited 30 minutes, making sure no one else was around, constantly checking the monitors. Then I grabbed the supplies and walked quickly to the storage building. Aerith was exactly where I'd left him. His eyes opened as I approached, and I felt that familiar, gentle pressure against my consciousness. "You came back." I said I would. I set down the supplies and crouched beside him. In the harsh beam of my flashlight, I could see him more clearly than I had last night. The gray skin had an almost pearlescent quality, shifting slightly in the light. There were markings along his arms and neck, delicate lines that looked like a hybrid between circuitry and veins, glowing faintly with that same blue-green bioluminescence I'd seen before. His leg was bent at an unnatural angle, and there was a dark substance seeping through what appeared to be some kind of fitted suit, or perhaps just his skin, I couldn't tell which. The substance didn't look like human blood. It was darker, thicker, with an opalescent sheen. "I brought water and food," I said, holding up a bottle and a protein bar. "I don't know if you can eat human food, but it's what I have." "Thank you. I can consume some of your food. My biology is different but not incompatible. We are both carbon-based life forms. The basic building blocks are similar." I helped him drink some water. His hands, 4 long fingers ending in what looked like suction pads rather than nails, were surprisingly dexterous, despite his injury. He drank slowly, carefully, and I could see some strength returning to him. "We need to talk about your craft," I said. "It's still out there. Someone's going to notice it eventually." "The cameras are back online. If anyone reviews the footage. I know. Aerith's mental voice carried a weight of concern. I have been trying to extend a perception field to camouflage it, but I am too weak. The field will not hold much longer. Perhaps another day, perhaps less. What happens if someone finds it? Your authorities will take it, study it. They will search for me, and when they find me... His mental voice faltered, and I felt a wave of fear so intense it made my chest tighten. I will not be treated as a person. I will be treated as a specimen, something to be dissected and analyzed. My people have observed what your governments do with things they do not understand. They do not seek to communicate. They seek to control, to weaponize. The fear in his voice made him seem less alien somehow, more human. Just someone scared and hurt and far from home, facing a fate worse than death. How do we fix it? I asked. The craft. Can it be repaired? The damage is extensive. The power core is intact, which is fortunate. If it had been breached, we would both be dead from radiation exposure. But the navigation array is destroyed. The hull breach must be sealed. The atmospheric compensation system needs recalibration. Without repair, the craft cannot achieve flight. Without flight, I cannot leave your world. Can you teach me? Can I help you repair it? There was a long pause. I could feel Aerith considering the question, weighing options, calculating risks. Perhaps, he finally said, if you are willing. But it will take time, several nights at minimum, and it will be dangerous for you if we are discovered. Your authorities do not react well to those who hide what they consider threats to national security. I thought about that, about what I was risking. My job, certainly. My freedom, probably. Maybe my life if the wrong people found out I'd been helping an extraterrestrial hide from government detection. But then I thought about the alternative, walking away, letting Aerith be found and taken, going back to my quiet, empty, meaningless routine of checking cameras and writing reports that nobody read, going back to being Thomas Reed, the 52-year-old ghost who existed but didn't really live. And I realized I didn't want that, couldn't go back to that, not after this. I'll help, I said. Tell me what needs to be done. Relief washed through his mental voice. Thank you, Thomas. Over the next 3 nights, I became an accomplice to something I still didn't fully understand. During my shifts, I'd check the cameras, make sure no one was near the loading area, and then spend hours with Aerith, learning about his craft and trying to figure out how to repair it. The technology was beyond anything I'd ever seen. There were no wires in the traditional sense, just pathways of light that flowed through translucent conduits. The power core hummed with energy I couldn't begin to explain, and the navigation array, the part that was destroyed, looked like a crystalline structure that had shattered into 1,000 pieces. This is impossible, I said on the second night, staring at the broken array. I don't even know where to start. Aerith, who was sitting beside me, his injured leg stabilized with makeshift splints I'd fashioned from materials in the storage building, reached out and touched my hand. I can show you. And suddenly my mind was flooded with information. Not words, not images, just pure understanding. I saw the array as it had been, whole and perfect. I understood how it connected to the rest of the ship's systems. I felt the flow of energy through it, like a river finding its path. When the connection broke, I gasped, my head spinning. What was that? Knowledge transfer. I gave you the understanding you needed. It is how my people teach. It is faster than language. I looked at the broken array again, and this time I understood. Not completely, but enough to see what needed to be done. We worked through the night. Aerith guided me, his mental voice patient and calm, while I used tools from the maintenance shed to try to piece together the shattered crystals. It was delicate work. Frustrating. Several times I wanted to give up, but Aerith never lost patience, and slowly, impossibly, progress was made. By the 4th night, something had shifted between us. We weren't just stranger and alien anymore. We were becoming something like friends. During a break, while I was eating a sandwich and Aerith was resting, he asked me a question. Thomas, why did you help me? You took a great risk for someone you do not know. I thought about it. I could have given him a simple answer. Because it was the right thing to do. Because you needed help. But the truth was more complicated than that. I've spent most of my life looking for something, I said finally. Answers. Meaning. A reason to believe there's more to existence than just going through the motions. I studied philosophy. I read everything I could. But nothing ever felt true. Nothing ever clicked. And then you showed up. Aerith watched me with those huge, dark eyes. "And now?" he asked. "Now I don't know what I believe," I admitted. "But for the first time in years, I feel like I'm part of something that matters. Even if I don't understand it. Even if it's terrifying. It's real." There was a long pause. Then Aerith said something that made my blood run cold. "Thomas, there is something I must tell you. Something I have been hesitant to share because I did not know if you were ready to hear it." My heart skipped a beat. "What?" "My people have been watching your world for a very long time, observing, recording. We do not interfere, but we document. And in our archives, there are records of significant events in your history, significant individuals." I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Where are you going with this?" "One of those individuals," Aerith continued, "was someone you called Jesus of Nazareth." The sandwich fell from my hand. What I didn't know was that everything I'd been taught about prayer, about faith, about Jesus himself, was about to be turned completely upside down. We have extensive records of his time on your planet. And Thomas, the teachings he tried to share with your people, they were misunderstood, distorted. What you were taught about prayer, about faith, about your relationship with the divine, it is not what he actually demonstrated. I stared at him. "You're telling me you have records of Jesus?" "Yes. And if you wish, I can show them to you. But I warn you, what you will see may challenge everything you believe about your own spiritual history." My mind was racing. This was insane. Completely insane. And yet, after everything that had happened, why wouldn't there be more? "Show me," I said. Aerith nodded. "Then let us finish the repairs first. The craft must be functional. Once it is, I will share the records with you. And Thomas, what you learn may change your life far more than finding me ever did." I didn't sleep for the next 2 days. Not because I couldn't, but because I didn't want to. Every spare moment I was at the complex, working on the craft. Aerith's leg was healing faster than any human injury would, which he explained was due to his species' accelerated cellular regeneration. He was able to move around more, which helped immensely with the repairs. By the 6th night, the craft was nearly functional. The hull breach was sealed. The power core was stable. The navigation array, while not perfect, was operational enough for flight. We were running out of time. Miller, the day shift supervisor, had started making comments about how I always seemed to be near the loading area during my rounds. He hadn't seen anything, but he was getting suspicious. We needed to finish this and get Aerith off planet before someone started asking questions we couldn't answer. On the 7th night, everything came together. The craft powered up for the first time since the crash, and the hum of the engine sent a vibration through the ground that made my teeth ache. Aerith stood beside me, his posture straighter now that his leg had healed. He looked at the craft, then at me. "It is ready." "So you're leaving?" "Yes." "I must. But first I will keep my promise. Come inside, I will show you the records." We climbed through the repaired hull breach into the interior of the craft. It was smaller than I'd imagined, but every surface seemed to serve multiple purposes. What looked like walls shifted and changed as Aerith touched them, revealing controls and displays. He gestured to a space in the center of the craft, and suddenly the air shimmered. A holographic display materialized, floating in 3-dimensional space. "This is the archive," Aerith said. "These are the records of Jesus of Nazareth, as observed and documented by my people 2,000 years ago." The hologram shifted, and I saw him. A man in simple robes standing in a dusty village square, surrounded by people. His face was weathered, kind, and intensely focused. He was speaking, gesturing with his hands, and even though I couldn't hear the words, I could see the passion in his expression. "This is real?" I whispered. "Yes. We observed him closely during his time on your world. He was significant. Not because he was divine in the way your religions claim, but because he understood something most humans did not. He understood the true nature of consciousness and its relationship to reality." "What do you mean?" Aerith touched the display, and the scene changed. Now I saw Jesus alone, kneeling in a quiet place, his hands raised, his face tilted upward. But something about the image was different. There was a faint glow around him, like heat shimmer on a summer road. "Watch carefully," Aerith said. As I watched, the glow around Jesus intensified, and then impossibly the ground in front of him began to change. Stones shifted, dust swirled, and from nothing a small plant sprouted, grew, and blossomed in a matter of seconds. "What am I seeing?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "You are seeing the application of focused consciousness," Aerith replied. Jesus was not praying in the way you were taught. He was not begging an external deity for intervention. He was aligning his consciousness with the fundamental creative force of the universe. He was demonstrating that reality is not fixed, it is malleable, and consciousness, when properly focused, can shape it. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. That's not what I was taught. That's not what anyone teaches. "No," Aerith agreed, because the truth was too dangerous. If people understood that they possess the power to shape reality through their own consciousness, they would not need intermediaries. They would not need institutions to tell them how to connect with the divine, so the teachings were altered, simplified, made into something safer, something that kept people dependent on external authority rather than awakening to their own power. The hologram shifted again, and now I saw Jesus surrounded by his disciples. He was speaking, and this time Aerith provided a translation, overlaying the ancient Aramaic with English. "Do not beg," Jesus was saying. "Do not plead with the Father as if you are separate from him. You are not separate. You are extensions of the same creative source. When you pray, do not ask. Declare. Feel the truth of what you desire as if it already exists. Align your emotion with your intention, and then release it, knowing that it is already done." One of the disciples asked, "But Master, how do we know our prayers will be answered?" Jesus smiled. "You do not wait for an answer. You become the answer. You do not hope for change. You embody the change. Faith is not belief that something might happen. Faith is certainty that it has already happened, even before your physical senses perceive it." I was shaking. This was nothing like what I'd been taught. Nothing like the prayers I'd said for 30 years, asking, hoping, waiting for something outside myself to make things better. "He's saying we create our own reality," I whispered. "In a manner of speaking, yes," Aerith replied. "Consciousness is not separate from the universe. It is an integral part of it. When you focus your thoughts, charge them with emotion, and hold them with certainty, you are not asking for reality to change. You are participating in its creation." The hologram shifted one final time, and I saw Jesus standing alone on a hillside at sunset. His arms were spread wide, and the glow around him was so intense it was almost blinding. "This was taken just before he performed what your scriptures call the feeding of the 5,000, Aerith said. He was not asking God to multiply the loaves and fish. He was aligning his consciousness with the infinite abundance of the universe and allowing it to flow through him. He was demonstrating what every human is capable of when they understand the true nature of reality. The hologram faded, and I was left standing in the dim interior of an alien spacecraft, my entire worldview shattered. "So everything I was taught," I said slowly, "about prayer, about faith, about waiting for God to act, it was all wrong?" "Not wrong," Aerith corrected gently. "Incomplete. Jesus tried to teach your people the truth, but after he was gone, those in power reshaped his message into something they could control. Prayer became begging. Faith became blind belief. And the truth that every human possesses the power to shape their reality through consciousness was buried." I sat down heavily on the floor of the craft, my mind reeling. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Because you helped me," Aerith said. "And because I believe you are ready to understand. Your life has felt empty because you were taught to wait for something outside yourself to give it meaning. But Thomas, the power to create meaning, to shape your reality, to manifest the life you desire, it has always been within you. You simply did not know how to access it." I looked up at him. "And now I do. Now you can learn, if you choose to." "How?" Aerith reached out and touched my forehead with one long finger. When he did, everything changed. Not just my understanding. My entire perception of what was possible. The same way Jesus did. Through focused intention. Through emotional alignment. Through certainty. Aerith reached out and touched my forehead with one long finger. "I am going to give you one more gift, Thomas. The technique Jesus used. It is not complicated, but it requires practice, discipline. And most of all, it requires you to let go of the belief that you are powerless." And then, for the second time, my mind was flooded with information. But this time it wasn't technical knowledge about navigation arrays or power cores. It was something deeper, a method, a practice, a way of focusing consciousness that felt both ancient and utterly natural. When the connection broke, I gasped, tears streaming down my face. "I understand," I whispered. "Good." Aerith stepped back. "Then I will leave you with this knowledge. Use it wisely, Thomas. And remember, you are not separate from the creative force of the universe. You are an expression of it. Act accordingly." He moved toward the craft's controls, preparing for departure. "Wait," I said. "Will I ever see you again?" "Perhaps. But whether you do or not, you have everything you need now. The question is, what will you do with it?" I didn't have an answer. Not yet. Aerith's craft lifted off silently an hour later, vanishing into the night sky without a trace. I stood in the empty loading area watching until there was nothing left to see. The sodium vapor lamps hummed. A cold wind blew through the chain-link fence. Everything looked exactly as it had a week ago. But I wasn't the same person who'd stood here 7 nights before. Then I walked back to the security office, logged the end of my shift, and drove home. But I wasn't going home to sleep. I was going home to test whether what Aerith had shown me was real, whether a 52-year-old man who'd given up on prayer 30 years ago could actually create his own reality. The engine hummed one last time as the craft disappeared into the stars. And with it went every excuse I'd ever had for why my life didn't matter. Now there was only one question left. Would I have the courage to actually use what I'd learned? Over the next 3 months I practiced what Aerith had shown me. Every morning before I went to sleep after my shift, I would sit in my small living room and focus, not on what I lacked, not on what I wished would happen, but on what I intended to create. At first it felt absurd, sitting there imagining my life differently, feeling emotions as if changes had already occurred. But Aerith had been clear. Emotion is the key. Thoughts alone are weak. But thoughts charged with emotion, with certainty, with the feeling of already having what you intend to create, those thoughts have power. So I practiced. And I started small, just like Aerith had advised. I focused on receiving unexpected money, not from winning the lottery or anything dramatic, just unexpected income. I visualized it, felt the gratitude of receiving it, held the certainty that it was already on its way. 3 days later, I got a call from an old friend I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. He'd just sold a business and wanted to pay back money he'd borrowed from me over a decade ago. Money I'd completely forgotten about. $2,000, deposited into my account the next day. Coincidence? Maybe. But it got my attention. I focused on meaningful connection, on finding people who thought about life the way I did. I visualized conversations that mattered, felt the warmth of real friendship. A week later, I struck up a conversation with a regular customer at the coffee shop I'd been going to for years. Turns out he was a retired professor who'd taught philosophy. We started meeting twice a week to talk. For the first time in years, I had someone I could discuss ideas with. Again, coincidence? Maybe. But the pattern was becoming harder to ignore. I focused on health, on feeling strong and energized despite my age. I visualized my body functioning optimally, felt the vitality I wanted to experience. Within a month, I'd lost 15 pounds without trying. My chronic back pain, something I'd just accepted as part of getting older, started to fade. I had more energy than I'd had in years. Coincidence? At this point, I'd stopped believing in coincidence. But the real test came when I decided to focus on something bigger, something I'd given up on years ago. Purpose. Not just a better job or more money, but real purpose. The feeling that my life mattered, that I was contributing something meaningful to the world. I didn't know what form it would take. I just knew I wanted it. So I focused on it, the same way I'd focused on everything else. I visualized waking up each day with a sense of mission, felt the satisfaction of doing work that mattered, held the certainty that this life was already unfolding, and then I waited. 2 months later, I got a call from Miller. He was retiring, and the company was looking for someone to take over as head of security for the entire complex. Better pay, better hours, more responsibility. And they wanted me. I almost laughed. 6 months ago, I would have said no, told them I was fine where I was, but now I saw it for what it was, an opportunity, a step towards something bigger. I took the job, and within weeks I realized it was just the beginning, because now I was in a position to make real changes, to improve safety protocols, to mentor younger guards, to actually contribute something beyond just showing up. And the strangest part? It all felt inevitable, like it had been waiting for me all along. I just had to become the person who was ready to receive it. That's when I finally understood what Jesus had been trying to teach, what Aerith had shown me. Reality is not fixed. We are not victims of circumstance. We are participants in creation. And the tool we use to shape our reality is consciousness, focused intention, charged with emotion, held with certainty. Not magic, not wishful thinking. A fundamental truth about how reality works, a truth that was taught, then buried, then forgotten. But now I knew it, and I couldn't unknow it. But here's what I didn't expect. The real transformation wasn't in the external changes, the job, the money, the opportunities. It was in who I'd become in the process of creating them. And that's when Aerith reached out one more time. So what did I do with that knowledge? I started living differently. Not loudly, not dramatically, just consistently. Every day I practiced. I focused on what I wanted to create. I felt the emotions of already having it. I released attachment to how it would arrive. And I watched as my life transformed in ways I never could have imagined 6 months earlier. People started noticing. Friends would ask what had changed, why I seemed different, happier, more confident, more alive, and I'd tell them as best I could what I'd learned. Not about Aerith, not about the craft or the crash, but about the truth Jesus tried to teach, about consciousness and creation, about the power we all have to shape our reality. Some people listened, most didn't, and that was okay. Because I'd learned that you can't force awakening on someone who isn't ready. All you can do is live your truth and let it speak for itself. But for those who were ready, who'd been searching for the same answers I'd been searching for, the conversation changed everything. And slowly, quietly, I started to see that this was my purpose. Not security work, not any specific job or title, but this. Sharing the truth with those who were ready to hear it. And that's why I'm telling you this story now. Because if you've made it this far, if you've listened to everything I've said about Thomas Reed and the night his life changed forever, then maybe you're ready too. Ready to hear that everything you were taught about prayer, about faith, about your relationship with the divine was incomplete. That you are not a powerless victim waiting for an external God to save you. That you are a conscious participant in the creation of your reality. That the power Jesus demonstrated, the power to heal, to transform, to manifest, is not unique to him. It's inherent in you, in all of us. It always has been. We just forgot. But now, if you choose to, you can remember. So let me ask you the same question Aerith asked me. What will you do with this knowledge? Will you dismiss it? Go back to the comfortable belief that life just happens to you? That there's nothing you can do except hope and wait and pray the old way? Or will you try something different? Will you start practicing the way Jesus actually taught? Focusing your intention, charging it with emotion, holding it with certainty, and watching as your reality begins to shift in ways you never thought possible. The choice is yours. It always has been. You just didn't know it until now. But here's what I can tell you from my own experience. Once you start living this way, once you begin to see the evidence accumulating, the synchronicities, the unexpected opportunities, the doors that open precisely when you need them to, you won't want to go back, because you'll realize you were never meant to be a victim. You were meant to be a creator. And that changes everything. 3 months after Aerith left, I was sitting in my living room drinking my morning coffee after another night shift when I felt it. A familiar pressure inside my mind. Gentle, non-invasive, but unmistakably there. Thomas. I nearly dropped my coffee mug. Aerith? Yes, I wanted to check on you. To see how you were progressing with the practice. I paused, trying to find the right words. I'm doing well. Better than well. Everything you showed me, everything you taught me, it's working. My life is completely different than it was 6 months ago. Good. I am pleased. There was warmth in his mental voice. And Thomas, there is something else I must tell you. Something I did not share before because I did not want to overwhelm you. What? The technique I taught you, the method Jesus used, it is not unique to your world. It is a universal principle. Consciousness shapes reality on every world, in every dimension. Jesus understood this because he was what my people call a bridge. Someone who incarnates on developing worlds to teach this truth. You're saying Jesus was like you? From another world? Not exactly. His origin is more complex than that, but his understanding was universal. He came to your world to demonstrate what humans are capable of when they awaken to their true nature, not to be worshipped, but to be emulated. Then why was his message changed? Why was it turned into something so different from what he actually taught? Because those who came after him, those who built institutions around his name, feared what would happen if everyone knew the truth. If every human understood they possessed the power to shape reality through consciousness, there would be no need for intermediaries, no need for priests or churches or hierarchies. People would be sovereign, free. That terrified those in power. So they altered the message, made prayer into begging, made faith into blind belief, and buried the truth under centuries of doctrine. And now? Now, the truth is being rediscovered, not just by you, Thomas, by many others across your world. People are waking up, remembering. And that frightens the old systems of control. But it cannot be stopped. The awakening has begun. Am I supposed to do something? I asked. Is there some role I'm meant to play? The same role everyone is meant to play. Live your truth. Share it with those who are ready. Do not try to convert or convince. Simply embody the principles, and your life itself will become the teaching. That's it? That is everything. There was a pause, and then Aerith added, Thomas, you were afraid for so long, afraid that your life had no meaning, that you had wasted your time, but now you understand. Every moment, every experience, even the years of emptiness and searching, they prepared you for this. You were exactly where you needed to be, and now you are exactly who you need to be. Tears filled my eyes. Thank you. For everything. Thank you, Thomas, for helping me when you had every reason to walk away, and for being brave enough to accept the truth when it was offered. Not everyone is. Will I hear from you again? Perhaps. But Thomas, you do not need me. You have everything now. The knowledge, the practice, the evidence. Trust yourself. Trust the process and watch as your life continues to unfold in ways you cannot yet imagine. And then the pressure faded, and he was gone. But this time I didn't feel alone, because I understood what he'd said. I had everything I needed. The truth was mine now, and what I did with it would determine not just the shape of my own life, but potentially the lives of everyone I encountered. That was 6 months ago. Since then, I've continued practicing, continued manifesting, continued watching as synchronicities and opportunities appear with such regularity that I've stopped being surprised by them. But more than that, I've started teaching, not in any formal way, just conversations with people who seem drawn to me. People who are asking the same questions I asked for 30 years. People who are tired of praying the old way and getting no results. People who are ready to hear that they are not powerless. And the response has been extraordinary, because deep down everyone knows the truth. They've always known. They just needed someone to remind them, someone to give them permission to believe in their own power again. That's what I do now. I remind people. I share what I learned from Aerith. I teach the method Jesus actually used, and I watch as lives transform. Not because I'm special, not because I have some unique gift, but because I'm willing to speak a truth that most people are afraid to say out loud. You are not a victim. You are a creator, and the power to shape your reality has been within you all along. So here we are. At the end of my story, but hopefully at the beginning of yours. Because now you know what I know. Now you've heard the truth that was buried for 2,000 years. The truth that Jesus tried to teach before his message was rewritten, reshaped, and turned into something safer. Something that kept people dependent instead of empowered. Something that made prayer into begging instead of creation. Prayer is not begging. It never was. It's creation. It's alignment. It's declaring what you choose to experience and then allowing the universe to arrange circumstances to match that declaration. Faith is not hope. It's not wishing or wanting or crossing your fingers. It's certainty. It's knowing, at a level deeper than thought, that what you've declared is already done. Already manifesting. Already on its way to you. You are not separate from the divine. You never were. You are an expression of it. a focal point through which universal consciousness experiences itself. When you align your thoughts and emotions with what you choose to create, you are not asking permission from some external God. You are exercising the creative power that has always been yours. And reality is not fixed. It's not a stage on which you play out a predetermined script. It's a canvas, a field of infinite possibility that responds to the vibrations you emit through your focused consciousness. This is what Aerith showed me. This is what Jesus tried to teach 2,000 years ago before his words were changed by those who feared what would happen if everyone knew the truth. And now you know it too. So, what will you do with this knowledge? What will you create? What life will you manifest now that you understand how it actually works? Will you dismiss it? Go back to the comfortable belief that life just happens to you, that you're at the mercy of forces beyond your control, that all you can do is pray the old way and hope someone out there hears you and decides to help? Or will you try something different? Will you start practicing the way Jesus actually taught, focusing your intention clearly, charging it with the emotion of already having it, holding it with certainty, not hope, releasing attachment to how it arrives, and watching as your reality begins to shift in ways you never thought possible? I can't make that choice for you. No one can. It's yours alone to make. But I can tell you this from my own experience. Once you start living this way, once you begin to see the evidence accumulating, you won't want to go back, because you'll realize something profound. You were never meant to be a victim. You were never designed to be powerless. You were never created to beg for scraps from a distant God who may or may not be listening. You were meant to be a creator, a conscious participant in the unfolding of reality, someone who shapes their experience through focused intention rather than passive hoping, and that changes everything. Thomas Reed, 52 years old, former philosophy student who thought he'd never find answers, night shift security guard who thought his life didn't matter, man who'd given up on prayer because 30 years of asking had produced nothing. That man doesn't exist anymore. He died the night Aerith crashed in the back loading area of Henderson Industrial, and someone new was born. Someone who understands that the power to create, to transform, to manifest was never outside him. It was always within, just waiting to be remembered, waiting to be used. And if it could happen to me after 52 years of believing otherwise, it can happen to anyone. It can happen to you. So I'll leave you with the same question Aerith left me with on the night he flew away into the dark Ohio sky. You have everything you need, the knowledge, the method, the truth. The only question is, what will you do with it? Will you create the life you truly desire? Or will you continue accepting the life you've been given? The choice has always been yours. You just didn't know it until now. But now you do. And that makes all the difference. Go create. Go manifest. Go become the person you were always meant to be. And when you do, when synchronicities begin appearing, when doors open that were closed before, when your reality starts shifting in impossible ways, remember where you heard this truth. Not from a church, not from a holy book interpreted by people with their own agendas, but from a 52-year-old man who met someone from another world and learned that everything he'd been taught about prayer, about faith, about his own power was incomplete, and that knowing the truth, the real truth, changed everything. The universe is waiting for you to step into your power. It's been waiting your whole life. All you have to do is remember who you really are. Remember what you're really capable of. And start creating accordingly. Your life is not a test. It's not a punishment. It's not something that happens to you. It's something you create. One thought, one emotion, one intention at a time. Now go create something beautiful.